Okay, welcome to the webinar. Another fantastic topic. I hope you like it. Please share, use the chat room, talk to us, tell me where you're from, whether you're interested in this topic from a parent point of view, teacher point of view, educator, administrator point of view, or as an individual, or all of it. Share, keep talking. That'll give me some ideas about where you're coming from. And this topic to me is such a fascinating topic. What I've done is really tried to consolidate. Some of you may have noticed that I was ambitious. I wanted to do 7 habits, and I don't think I'm going to get through in an hour. So I've just consolidated to 5 topmost executive function habits, and here we go. Tell me how what you think about these ideas as I share, comment, and let's grow as a community that supports executive function. So as you see, the topic is ready, set, go. The timeliness could not have been better. So what is executive function? I think I have talked about this a lot and keep talking about it. Executive function is a set of mental skills that we use to manage our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors to achieve goals. The caveat there these goals are set by self, for self. And one of the tricky things in education is in earlier years, the goals are set by somebody else. And in later years, these goals are set by the student themselves. Now, if that transition doesn't happen, then we have students who are dependent, children who are dependent. And what we want more to see happen is independent children who have sense of agency and who have good sense of knowing where they're going and why they need to get there and how they can get there. So continuing this conversation about executive function and prefrontal cortex, the global picture here is that the prefrontal cortex of the brain acts as the air traffic controller. And what do we know about the air traffic controller? That it actually keeps an aerial perspective on the entire landscape of flights. So we know what's coming in, we know what's going out, we know whether it's clear to land, clear to not land, what's the weather condition. So that gestalt, which is, by the way, served by the right hemisphere, is that capacity to see the bigger picture. So that's what executive function skills allow you to do. It allows you to look at the bigger picture of life and contextualize goals in the landscape of life, not just in the moment. And that's the distinction between pursuing goals and achieving and taking care of business, not just to take care of tomorrow's you, but 10 years down the road you. And that's the true skill set that we want to develop through habits. So just to give you a refresh everybody's mind, why these skills matter and why should we keeping them at the forefront of our learning and teaching. These skills have lifelong implications, and they are, number one, directly, research shows that they are important for school readiness. This is before a child arrives in pre-K. So what is the biggest skill set that we talk about in the preschool, pre-K age group is impulse control. So that seems to be a greater determinant of success rather than even IQ. Then it has lifelong implications when it comes to math and reading competence throughout kindergarten to 12th grade. So if you're talking about the foundational skills such as math and reading, so as you know, reading is used for reading to learn and then learning to read and then reading to learn. So math is also that complex abstract reasoning. So both these skills eventually kind of build our cognitive competence, but executive function allows to manage the learning of these skill set. And mathematical skill set, particularly the problem solving, requires incredible executive function skills. Then you can see that health, wellness, and treatment adherence. This is a really interesting data that research shows that health and wellness, that means your routines to exercise daily or to say no to fatty foods and say yes to salads. Those are healthy choices that we make. The wellness, which is psychological, I think I'm feeling a little low, or I need to talk to somebody about this, or I need to kind of find a way out of this funk that I'm feeling, that also requires executive function. And the last thing, that when life is not going per plan, we create, we seek help. And if you look at all the help you get. I just had a Pilates instructor. We did a Zoom class yesterday, and she repeatedly tells me, why don't you do this exercise by yourself? So that contact with Pilates instructor, or if you're a coach, contact with a coach. If you're a therapist, the contact with the person who's helping you is recommending a treatment protocol. And that treatment protocol requires adherence to it. Adherence means sticking with the plan, and that ability requires executive function. So many times, a lot of people come to you or parents try to take children to experts. Experts see children, and we find that things fall apart when they're not with you. And that is because of executive function. Job skills and productivity require executive function, that multifaceted goal management, knowing how to work smarter, not harder, applying for a job and becoming a candidate that's desirable, as much as then keeping that job once you have it. All that requires executive function. So the reason we should really intercept early years is because we can then prepare these children for jobs. But job readiness is actually executive function readiness through learning of formal subjects. And that part sometimes is lost on children. So it's really important that we advocate that and use this language of self-regulation, agency, mission in life, or having purpose. But purpose is to manage myself. The next thing is, of course, this marital harmony is a very interesting topic. So forget the marital harmony, even dating life, or forget the dating life, making friends. So that dependability and cooperativeness is really, really if underneath skill set for that is executive function. So a higher divorce rate is seen with people with executive dysfunction, all mental disorders, OCD, ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, those kinds of conditions create a real difficulty because in older age group, what we begin to see is mental inflexibility. And then you become combative, you become non-cooperative, you become difficult to work with. These are the characteristics that then when you bring in close quarters of intimacy becomes a problem. The next thing, emotional outburst and recklessness in behavior. That also is directly connected with executive function. So losing your mind, crying or throwing a tantrum, or finding things, particularly things when they don't go your way, as unbearable, and that causing emotional meltdown. I mean, how many times we have seen people, this used to be before when we used to fly frequently, but people having a meltdown at the airport, adults, or children when their popsicle falls to the ground, having a mental breakdown. So having a meltdown in younger years and having a mental breakdown is the continuum of lack of emotional regulation, which is tied back to executive function. And the last thing is the tendency for violence and criminality. And there's a lot of interesting data, particularly even Sonia Luther, who I have had on my podcast a couple of times. If you get a chance, subscribe to my podcast, which is called Full Prefrontal. I have had almost 120 guests and some amazing range of topics I have covered. And she has studied children in affluent communities who have everything going for them. And you would think criminality might be associated with poverty, but that's not true. So even in that group of students, that an inability to bear stress and acting out as a rebellion or vandalism is another thing I often talk about when it comes to that lack of impulse control and inflexibility and inability to come up with appropriate solutions can lead to violence and criminality. So that actually is shown that people who are in prison, people who are actually have problems such as driving while drunk, all those are suffering from executive dysfunction. So I hope I've made my case that executive function skills matter, they're extremely relevant for life, and at the heart of executive function then is forming of habits or lack of having mental set of skills that allow you to demonstrate consistency and ability to carry through actions over a large period of time. So what are habits? So habits are tiny decisions. And of course, these tiny decisions, the trick is the decisions that were made early on. They're not made in the moment. So in the moment when you make a decision, it requires you to activate your impulse control. It requires you to activate delaying gratification. So if you remove that from the equation, a habit is something you decided once upon a time and you stick to that decision. Nothing can violate that decision making. That's what good habits allow you to do. They are predetermined series of decisions about actions that repeat themselves. This is my definition of a habit. So series of predetermined. So the decisions are predetermined. They are not, it cannot be a habit that I wake up at 6 o'clock every day and then I brush my teeth and then I put on my shoes and I go for a run. That's a predetermined decisions, a series of decisions that are non-violent, or you don't mess with them. So this is really important about a habit. It's a series, that means there are multiple decisions, they're actions, they're not thought processes, and they repeat themselves. And the last caveat there is they happen in a certain order. The order is really, really critical because executive function is executionary. That means it invokes motor memory. So it is something that requires a certain order. So take example of my presentation. There is an inherent order to it, right? Introduction of the topic, presenting some supporting ideas, introducing strategies, and then walking you through the strategies one by one. But hopefully for your processing convenience, I've taken the time to systematize and organize in a way that makes logical sense. So that's the predetermination there, that the sequence needs to be logical. So you cannot, some actions can be concurrent, that means they can happen simultaneously, but some actions are sequential, right? You cannot change into new clothes before you remove the clothes. That's a predetermined sequence. But you can wear new clothes before shower or by, not taking a shower and after the shower. So if you skip the shower part, you can just change into new clothes without taking a shower. So it's really important as we present habits to children, what is removable part of the habit and what is not removable part of the habit. And that I talk a lot about that with my clients and the kids that I have coached over the years. A habit is, I love this definition, a habit is keeping the promise you make to yourself. And so it is a promise, which is you committing. So there's a sense of commitment there. And the commitment is a psychological characteristic. So it's executive function. If you look at the top-down system, the characteristic or temperament is something that is a little bit innate to a person. So not being able to make a great commitment, it may be a personality quirk that can be compensated by non-negotiable habits. That means I don't question it, I just do it. So these are my list of habits these are 20 habits to me that are extremely pertinent to school success. And I feel that these are habits because these are cultivated and a motor response to the environment. That means how I respond to the environment with a pre-decision making. That means I have already made a decision how I will do this. So paying attention to class, I have already decided that I'll ignore the distractions. So if I come to the class with that mindset, I have already said no. So I am inhibiting because of a rule that I have come up for myself. So if you have a rule, then you know what to inhibit and what to activate. And that's what executive function is all about, by the way. What do I inhibit? What do I allow? What do I disallow? What do I allow? And knowing the rules and expectations. So the teacher says, if I'm doing a Zoom class, that everybody needs to gather in the waiting room 5 minutes before. And that's her rule. And so knowing the rule and expectations and following the rules is a habit that one can cultivate. You will see many of these habits children are not consistent with because one, these rules change based on people's circumstances, environment. It requires situational intelligence. And some students do not have that situational intelligence. Some adults I know who do not have the situational intelligence, which is adapting to a new rule because situations changed. And then working independently, checking work for mistakes, fixing mistakes, improving quality of work, timely turning in completing work, taking interest in schoolwork. This is another interesting habit if you think about it. Taking interest in schoolwork. I have a habit of taking interest in schoolwork. I do a lot of work with students, and I talk to them about the role of curiosity. Curiosity, by the way, is a cultivated muscle. Last time those who joined for my grit webinar, and I encourage you to look that up if you haven't, I talked a lot about this idea of sticking with it kind of ness, that tendency to stick with things. That is really a stepping stone towards developing a passion for something. Curiosity is kind of a seed that becomes a sapling as passion. So children need to have a habit of taking interest in things, particularly if the things look a little bit boring. And things have a tendency to look boring if they don't make sense. So this is the kind of equation that needs to be translated. So these are just the habits that I feel that if we are working on executive function, I feel these are the things that need to change. So if you're looking for change, look for change in these areas. So here's my conceptual map for developing habits. So at the bottom of it, as you can see, the foundation of foundation of habit formation is executive function, which is a set of mental skills that we use to manage our goals. Based on those goals, we learn to prioritize and take decisions. And these decisions are based on the principles, guiding principles. Those are also designed by self, for self. So this is the work that needs to happen when we are teaching processes to children. This is internalized, by the way. This is not self-evident. If you have a teenager that you are working with or coaching or raising, the guiding principles that makes that teenager get out of bed without an alarm is invisible. You only see the results. Did you get up without an alarm, or did you not get up without an alarm? And I see a tendency to rescue. I see a lot of rescuing. And that rescuing is really dangerous, because without the guiding principles, what seems to be keeping the routine in place is the motivation and engagement and guidance from an adult. That's not a habit. That's not self-guidedness. So I think we will be missing out if we don't do this work. And this is why I designed this ExQ software, which I believe that is designed to tackle the problems at a foundational level and teach skills processes. Because I felt that there was a lot of conversation about motivating children, a lot of propositions were made to children, and a lot of ideas are presented. And some ideas, just like a child is sitting with a sieve, some ideas pass through, some ideas stay. And it's really never telling what stays and what doesn't stay. And then what happens is their guiding principles are weak, and they arrive in a college and without those guiding principles, where they have single-handedly learned one habit is to ask somebody else to solve their problem, and that is not self-reliance. So that's what we want to move to. So habits and routines are to achieve smaller goals, and then that becomes a lifestyle, which is achieving the larger goal. So a lifestyle to me is not a point, it is a path that you're on. So I think this is the change that if you're thinking about. So please share, what are you thinking about these ideas? What comes to your mind? If you have any questions, please kind of type them. If you have some interesting observations about this approach, share with me. Tell me what parts really speak to you. So let's take this kid who is working at night, doing his homework with his laptop, and he has a phone, right? So, and all his social media is active, and he's getting notification. So now for an observer might tell the student to put that away. And my question always is how somebody else telling the kid to put something away will become a habit. You see what I mean? So a habit can only become a habit if the stronger foundation of executive function skills exists and the priorities and decision-making skills are mastered by that student based on some guiding principles, and this is a lifestyle. So there is a way to talk about lifestyle, but I find it more fruitful to talk about the supporting skill set. This is I hope we're going to give it a shot. I interviewed a friend's son who is a rising sixth grader for this webinar, and I was asking him, what did he learn, or what is he thinking about starting the fall semester?
So as you get ready for school, what stresses you out the most?
That I won't be able to get everything done.
Tell me why you're worried about that.
Because we were just getting used to it from March through May, and now it's gotten really serious that you can't like mess anything up, otherwise it's gonna cost you pretty badly. Like you can't miss big deadlines and turn them in like 2 days late because you either had like something going on at home or something like that. That's not gonna be an excuse really anymore.
How so? What if you ask the teacher to extend the deadline? Do you think that's a possibility?
I mean, that's one of the exceptions. But like, if you have a really big project and you're in charge of taking care of like a pet or a dog or a cat, normally during the day when you're at school, you don't have to do those things, and you're in the middle of class doing whatever you need to do. Sometimes the dog just comes up to you and says, I have to go to the bathroom, otherwise I'm going to, in your living room or whatever.
Gotcha. So that you're worried that how are you going to balance the chores that you might have at home, different teachers' expectations, and meeting the deadlines?
Yeah.
All right, so take a minute and type in some of the things that you're worried for your children, your students, what habits you think are lacking in them or might be lacking, or you're afraid if these habits don't emerge that it will create a disadvantage for this school year. So go ahead and share that if you don't mind. Thank you everyone for doing that. Okay, so let's talk about ways to help develop executive function habits for self and for those who supervise. And the distinction between the two is, remember, if it's your idea that you should use an alarm, or if it's your idea, use a timer when you do your homework. Your executive functions go in it and not the child's. So yes, it is really important to guide the students, guide the children to develop skills so that they can guide themselves. But there's a point where the transfer needs to happen, just like a relay race, where you hand the baton to the child and the child takes the baton and runs. So both the processes need to be ensured in your work with children. So let's begin. So the first habit I feel is activate the mental GPS. I will add it in our show notes or in the handout, but I have a TED Talk, if you have not seen it already, which I have talked about this topic. It's a really very important topic to me because I feel that if you can imagine that every student is like a Porsche, have fantastic abilities and skills, the great engine, great look, great performance ability. However, where to go is going to change based on grade, right? So a elementary student has a different destination versus middle school versus high school versus college versus life for all of us. So this destination requires a GPS. So GPS does a couple of things, right? It locates the destination. So it has the capacity to recognize on a larger map where it is, and it creates a map that connects point A to point B. What I love about GPS, it does three things. I mean, it offers three solutions. It says quickest route, shortest route, and an alternative route, right? And I love this idea because every single individual needs to think about these three alternatives. The quickest route may not be the most effective route, but if you're running short on time, quickest route may be the best route. The alternative route is a great route in crisis, right? And then the shortest route is, how do I get from point A to point B with most efficiency? That's when the shortest route is most effective. So this wisdom that children need to develop, that there are multiple alternatives to reach the same destination, is a really critical element of building or finessing that mental GPS. And I highly recommend that before you start working with children and saying, okay, what do you have to do? Don't jump into what is it that you have to do. It's like a child saying to you that I need to go to New York, I need to go to LA, and I need to go to, let's say, Portland Town, USA. Well, if you have all these destinations, you're going to need multiple maps, right? But I mean, this analogy doesn't hold true, because in mental GPS, you can be pursuing multiple destinations at the same time. That means you can be working with your piano teacher and work on piano. You may be a soccer a student who is taking soccer, and you may be working on your math and science, so which is your weakest subject. So that's possible because of the mental GPS. So mental GPS holds no candle to the real life GPS. So so what are the suggestions? I have 3 concrete suggestions for you. Number 1 is establish personal identity. And so personal identity. So take a minute and share with me, what do you think I mean by establishing personal identity? So in the context of driving a Porsche, you can say, I am a safe driver. That's my identity. So when I am on the road, I'm going to take precautions of adhering to the rules of the road. I am going to make sure that I keep my gas tank full. I check my air in my tire. That is keeping up with the identity. So what do you think the couple of identities that you can think of for your students? Go ahead, and I'm going to click on the chat so I can see it. And thank you for Nancy's writes that I'm concerned that the low level of expectation followed by summer vacation has led to a definite weakening of already weak skills. And that's so true. And hence, this kind of approach will really be helpful, that you begin with larger context. So personal identity can be like, I'm a good student, great. And I'm bad at math. That's so true. Because, thank you, Rachel. Because yes, I think sometimes identity doesn't need to have to be about your strengths. It can be about your weakness as well. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that. The second suggestion I have is identify the destination and prioritize the route. So this is really between the 3 routes: the shortest route, the alternative route versus the quickest route. Am I focused on the number of time? Am I concerned about efficiency? Or am I dealing with a crisis that I need to come up with an alternative? And stay the course with Kathy. What this means is, when my children were little and GPS just came into the cars, we labeled our GPS voice Kathy. And so, of course, poor Kathy, because she couldn't talk back, but she would tell you, like, make a left turn, make a left turn, make a left turn. And just to, for the heck of it, we would try right turn, and then she would reroute, right? So there is this internal Kathy in all of us. And this in literature talks about a self-directed speech. And this is one of the transitional milestones in cognitive abilities development, where a transitioning from having somebody else's voice guiding you, then you begin to guide yourself. And that internalized speech is a really important tool to stay the course. We often describe this, right? It's like, I'm going downstairs and I come downstairs and I'm standing in front of the fridge and I've forgotten why. That's a great failure in working memory. And often, adults after 40 even describe this like, I'm having a brain fart. But this ability to use self-directed speech is really key to guide your thinking through the process of understanding what is it that I am pursuing. And this can really create a helpful way for students to know what they're doing in the given moment. And this is also called a task positive attention. That means I am finishing this paper, and until I do that, I don't think I can take that call. I see that my friend texted me, I'm not going to look at it. And so instead of thinking it, one of the guiding principles can be you talk it out to you. So there's a doer you and there's a supervisor you guiding you as you're passing through passage of time. Try it, actually. Share with me if you do this already. And I do that a lot, particularly at night when I start kind of toggling between websites and PowerPoints and emails. I tell myself, listen, I don't think I'm being efficient. You're being tired, Sucheta. Stop looking at emails. Just focus on your PowerPoint. So this is a self-directed speech, very effective if done well. You have to kind of overcome looking absurd and sounding absurd. But this doesn't need to be externalized. It's also, there's a technique called subvocal rehearsal. So talking quietly to yourself so you can hear the internalized self-directed speech only made to yourself. So it's a great idea. And thank you for those who keep sharing and commenting. It feels like I'm in front of a great room of audience and I get to see what you're thinking. So thank you for doing that. So a personal identity and narrative would be, I'm a Porsche. That means I'm a smart and capable student and I struggle. That can be a personal narrative. I am a problem solver. I'm a Broadway star. So there can be many ways you can help children. So as you're beginning the year, one of the identities, particularly if I'm working on executive function, that I nurture is I'm a problem solver. So I kind of create a whole narrative what problem solvers do. And as I mentioned to you earlier, you can have facets. And I often use a diamond image. And I'm sorry, this talk can be very expansive, so I don't have it in here. But I often use a diamond, and a diamond has many facets. So I show the student that you can have multiple identities that you are pursuing, and this is not schizophrenic or multiple personality disorder. But what you're doing is you activate a minor versus a major identity. So my major identity is I'm a problem solver. I'm a creative thinker. That's my identity. So I always think creatively. And then a minor identity may be I'm punctual. So you don't necessarily have a punctual creative person, right? So if I now mesh these two identities, then I am going to respect others and their time and show up there on time. So kind of having, by the way, I recommend you do this in writing. So let's think about how does this actualize. So if a student is in middle school or high school or elementary school, they have interest in musical, they love theater or performance, they're not great singers or any such thing, they don't play any musical instrument, they just love to do fun and games. Great. Can this translate into being a Broadway star? So a lot of literature and many ways people describe this as a stretch goal. So taking your stretch goal and taking your identity and connecting keeping the consistency with your identity, you can connect your stretch goal through your identity. So let's talk about this. This is my diagram of how I help people to think about who they are and how their daily actions can then again. So when you talk about habits, you cannot talk about habits until you get into where the habit is going to take you. So let's say you are a Broadway star. You want to become a Broadway star. So that's my stretch goal. And I am only in 8th grade. I don't know if I'm going to be a Broadway star, but you know what I would like to do is I have some SMART goals along the way. I would like to go into the top theater program. Also, in middle school, I want to try out and play a role in middle school play. As I get older, I want to take a lead before I graduate and become a thespian and then go to the topmost. When I go through these SMART goals, only then the stretch goal is possible. But all that is possible with a daily habit. So if I am going to do a tryout, it is really important to memorize the lines before my tryouts. So kind of finding meaning in the tryout and it not guaranteeing that you will become a Broadway star begins in that journey of traveling through time and connecting to the future self. And those who know my work, I talk a lot about future self. And this kind of mapping is really important. And what is really important here is to talk about the obstacles. So you cannot talk about obstacles. So failing to memorize lines, I can't seem to remember. Mom, would you read these lines with me? Or you say the teacher, can I get another role? I really like that character gets to tumble and this character is just standing. So I don't don't like that character. So this looks like a obstacle in my own ability to pursue a daily habit is my attitude or my failure to succeed even after trying, or my failure to try. So keeping tabs of those obstacles is an important process, but that requires a very, very big spitting out of a route by the mental GPS. So a mental GPS, when you plug in, this is what it spits out. You know, when you look, before you say begin on your car GPS, it shows you the entire route. It shows you the destination, and it says you're going to New York. Well, it's going to be 536 miles, and you're right here. So before you say begin, you get to see the bigger picture. So giving that opportunity for your student to see the big picture is incredibly valuable. Next is it's really important that once you create the destination, you create routines. So routines are predetermined series of sequence of events that repeat themselves. So these are things that you do in order, you do them every day, and you do them in that particular sequence. Only then it's a routine. So in my work, I always talk about these 4 foundational routines that are really, really important. So getting started routine. Again, we do not have time here, but every routine must have a rehearsal attached to it. A rehearsal is you looking at what is it that you're going to do, which is a visual rehearsal. Second is a verbal rehearsal. That means saying your sequence. And third is a mental rehearsal. So I see that, Rachel, you're talking about a checklist is great as a physical GPS. One of the things I would like you to modify in your usage of checklists is it's really important that routines are inviolate. So that means the getting started routine has a sequence. And once the sequence is written, you activate it. That means you act in that routine for 6 weeks. And then that routine becomes actualized and become part of motor memory. And then you execute every task by creating these routines. Now, one important thing about a difference between or distinction between a checklist and a plan. So list of things to do is not same as a plan. Any thoughts? Can you share with me why that's not the case? So listing things to do is not same as a plan, because plan must have 2 features. One, when, what's the start time and end time, and in sequence with what. So if I'm going to say sometime today, I'm going to pick up milk, and I'm also going to deposit a check, and I'm going to stop by at CVS for a medicine for my mom. This is a to-do list. However, once I'm about to step out of the house, I map it and I say CVS comes first, and bank comes next, and then comes milk, and then I'll go home. But wait, bank closes, CVS doesn't. Boom, I reorder that, and now I am going to go to the bank first, then drive a little bit extra to go to CVS, then go to get milk, and then go home. So this is a really critical thing so a to-do list is a great holding place. It's a place in lieu of working memory, but it is not same as a plan. So remember that. So when you are teaching planning abilities, you have to tell or work with students to understand what are the time limitations and what are the spatial limitations and what are the executionary limitations. You cannot do one before you do the other. If that kind of condition exists, you have to adhere to it. So what I encourage all of you to do is a typical routine. It must have 5 steps. Routine must have an item that's inviolate. That means getting started routine. So my getting started routine is brush my teeth, take a shower, change clothes, check my email, and meditate and then check my email. So now brushing teeth is inviolate for me. I cannot function without brushing teeth. Taking a shower is an option for me. So if that gets removed, then it gives me a chance to actually have a morning Zoom meeting and then check. So my routine has some flexible parts and some non-flexible parts. So you need to talk about these concepts with students, that what's the flexible part and what's the non-flexible part. And so that's all for the routines. Keeping my eye on time, I'm moving forward, but I hope I have given you a lot to think about when it comes to processing and teaching these skills. I love Michael Phelps' story, and he was diagnosed with ADHD and incredibly inattentive, a lot of struggle with schoolwork, a lot of difficulty in getting in the zone, finding a path. And his mom, who is also an educator, amazing educator, she was a guiding star, and she recognized the value of structure and consistency, and she offered it. And so even Michael Phelps, in spite of ADHD, was able to show up at 5 a.m. every morning for his practice. And when I say in spite of ADHD, one caveat I'm mentioning, not at all limiting kids with ADHD, but there's definitely experience a lot of sleep disturbance, and they also tend to have difficulty with technology. So they prolong their nights. So they find themselves to be not the morning person, morning people. So this is just something inspirational that we know has worked for someone. Second is engineering the environment. I love this idea that your maturity of self-control can come from your environment without not involving the self. So if you're on a diet, then remove the cookies. So when you engineer the environment that is conducive to your goal achievement, you're likely to succeed faster than you keep the cookies right in front of you and watch them and say, I will develop a resolve to not touch the cookies in spite of them being there. That's a foolish decision. I think that is truly a harmful decision. And there's a lot of literature. I have had Roy Baumeister, the father of self-control, who talks about this. Remove the obstacles from needing to activate your self-control. So let's talk about how this is. Your environment needs to reflect your lifestyle features. So if I am a problem solver, I need to have everything in my environment that allows me to be a problem solver. So I need to have tape, I need to have scissors, I need to have clips, I need to have extra charger. Why? Because I'm a problem solver, and a problem solver has already thunk about the future problems and has the solution in front of them. Engineer the environment and then reset and bring it to baseline. And I have used a toilet paper here specifically. I like to use this example that you need to replenish the toilet paper. The very function of toilet paper is to be used. And as soon as you finish using, you cannot reuse. You have to have new toilet paper. Similarly, your environment needs to be brought to a baseline of perfect condition where optimal performance is guaranteed. So environment can get disrupted or moved and shuffled around. I was working on I did a panel yesterday with two wonderful guests, and there were almost 350 people in the audience. And I had my entire desk was full of notes, full of paper, full of sketches, and the books and copies of articles. And that was a complete disarray. So this morning, after my moderation, I was a moderator. I finished moderating the panel. I was done, and I reset the environment because I had this webinar to do. So resetting is bringing back and inducing neutrality, because that really external and environmental cues can, one, prompt you to know what your goal is, and second, it can diminish the burden on your working memory and your attention. So it's really, really important. So craft a learning lifestyle. So as I said, a problem solver, a student who is a problem solver has all the tools for problem solving. Similarly, a student who is a learner or a lifelong learner has access to all the ways he knows how to learn effectively. So this may be another thing that you might want to work on with your students, is what is your learning lifestyle? So to become a lifelong learner, there are lots of things that you can do, and here are the things that you need to kind of create in your environment. as I mentioned, engineer the workspace, and insert explicit and implicit prompts. One of the students I'm working with, I have talked with him about having a plant in the room. And there's a lot of research that talks about simple sign of life having a wonderful positive impact on your psyche. And having to take care of your plant is also a requirement of other-centeredness. So I'm not only concerned about me, and I'm going to have a plant to take care of. By the way, plant is better than a pet, better than a goldfish, better than a dog. It's too much responsibility, but I think you should give students responsibilities even as young as a kindergartner. And taking care of a plant and having the plant in the workspace is a great reminder of my responsibility towards something that's other than my work or my parents, or work and my teacher. So let's talk about declutter-free, distraction-free space, built-in prompts. A prompt is a calendar. So as this is an example of if a student's desk, and if you can see, this is the student desk who is a problem solver. He shared with me how he has all the tools accessible to him, and this particular thing is his little a big picture or dream or stretch goal. These are tickets for Atlanta Braves, and he had gone to see a World Series. I'm not sure if I'm getting that right. I'm not a baseball player, as you can tell, but he kept those tickets and he's gathering money to go to a future game and pay for that for himself. And he wants to become a sports broadcaster. So there's something in his environment that reminds him of that stretch goal. Does that make sense? Then another important thing is about, again, getting the child's mind out of that self-centered, egocentric thought process is what does the community look like, a learning community. Teachers can do that as a learner community calendar. Parents can do that as a family calendar, and color coding and keeping it updated. And most importantly, analyzing what can become routine. So if you have volleyball, you can have a volleyball routine. That means night before, in the calendar, I work with students writing VR, volleyball routine. So now since volleyball is predictable part, it's something that repeats itself, and it happens in the same order, then you can have a routine attached to that routine, which is I pack my bag, I replace the uniform, I make sure that my shoes are ready, or whatever the components to volleyball can be tracked that way. All right, the third habit is looking back to look ahead. This is a really important process built into executive brain, which is self-reflection. So self-reflection, I like to call that spur of the moment. So stop, pause, reflect, and redirect. So even though I guess it's maybe contradictory, but the spur of the moment is in that moment, you activate your thinking about thinking, which is a metacognitive process. And for that, it requires you to stop. And this is a very interesting process, counterintuitive to becoming efficient. A lot of people feel if I stop to reflect, it's going to slow me down. And I actually argue that that's not so. So stop the action, pause to refocus on the relevant parts to reflect upon. You do not need to reflect, is this the right goal for me? That would be a terrible reflection. What should be, is this the right step for me? Have I bumped into a hiccup? And I'll give you an example of spur would be our family every Friday, we get together and do something social or fun. And inevitably, I don't know if this happens to you all or not, but I find myself getting completely stuck in choosing what to watch. So we are pausing and refocusing and saying, how much time are we going to allow ourselves to spaz around and not make a choice? And in 10 minutes, we're going to just watch whatever is available. So to me, that's a better alternative than to just kind of spend 1 hour and then get to nothing. So I'm noticing that we have 10 minutes, so I'm going to speed up a little bit here. So keep a glitch list. This is a list of errors, mistakes, and faux pas. But most importantly is to kind of identifying themes in these mistakes so that you can create global problem solving process. Reflection sheet, is what I know, what I need, what I predict, what works, what I don't see, and who can help. So this kind of process is really, really helpful. I will skip this story. Let's go to number 4, set the emotional thermostat. So what's the fundamental feature of a thermostat? Thermostat allows to set and regulate a particular temperature. Thermometer just goes up and down based on whatever the temperature is. So emotional dysregulation is like a thermometer. It just spits out how you're feeling. A thermostat keeps it at that. So if you set the home temperature for 72, it is going to reach an equilibrium. So that one of the 2 emotional components that I find act as a guiding principles for that thermostat is patience and tolerance. So tolerance for feelings of frustration, tolerance for feeling of anger, tolerating your own annoyances, and patience for other people, patience for systems, patience for rules that other people are imposing. So when you do that, you're achieving an equilibrium. That's part of the emotional regulation. So in order to reach that social emotional equilibrium, know about the lizard brain and the wizard brain. So that reflexive, not thoughtful process, and then the executive process, which is the wizard brain. Practice slowing down, pausing, and self-reflecting. So building that frequent pauses in work is a really important part of teaching kids how to achieve that. And developing prompts for self-reflection, self-redirection. This is a cute story that Michael Phelps' mom and Michael Phelps, who used to get very easily frustrated, came up with a sign of C, which meant compose yourself. So she would be in the bleachers, he would be throwing a tantrum or taking his goggles and throwing, and she would sit there and do this to him. And one fine day, she was losing her mind and she was getting frustrated. So from the pool, Michael looked up and said to his mom, I thought that was so cute and clever. So having some codes between your students and you can really, really be very effective. And the last thing is master the ask. This is that self-advocacy piece. Well, this is really important to me because it's kind of coming to terms with that we cannot be all that we want to be without the help of the others. And we need to have a relationship with others. And the practice of intentionally connecting with others is really, really important. So please share with me which of these 5 habits speaks to you the most. What do you like about it? And share with everybody so they also know. And as I come, take us to the end of this presentation. So learn to determine what is needed. This is a really important metacognitive skill, teaching students what is it that you need help, rather than stepping in and saying, can I help? Always say, do you know what you need? And this kind of language is really requires the student to introspect. Sometimes students may come and say, I don't know what I need. Then you can say, what is it that you're struggling with? So kind of getting them to define is really, really helpful. I love Akila and the Bee movie. If you have not seen it, you must watch it. If you've seen it, see it again. I saw that a couple of weeks ago after watching it many, many years ago. But there's a little piece that she comes to realize that there are 50,000 coaches, that her brother's friends can be her coach, her neighborhood kids can be her coach. So coach is anybody who has insight, slightly more than I do, primarily because they see something I don't. Not that they're better than me or I'm better than them, but this idea that seek help from the entire universe is a lovely concept, I think. And practice the ask. This is a really, really important practice, particularly if your students have gone in the Zoom land. Make sure they have some knowledge how to ask help in writing or via email or sending voicemails. I make students leave voicemails or emails all the time as a way to practice. So in summary, how am I doing? I'm doing great, I think. Be a mentor, not a fixer. It is very tempting to help people when they're struggling. And this can really help. This can become a mantra of people who love to help. And we all love to help. So I believe that this is really, really a true nature of those who help everybody, right? So a fixer is somebody who comes and solves somebody else's problem. Mentor stands next to a person while they're solving their problem. And this is a really a art of patience within ourselves. And it is time consuming, so I respect the time that it needs. Zoom in on I'm a problem solver kind of identity. I personally, if you want your children to develop this self-reliant attitude and develop skills to become independent, then the most important identity they need to have is they are their own problem-solving machine. Why? Because as you know, solving a problem is far more effective than becoming successful. To me, successful is a byproduct of solving problems. But if you want to be successful, then a problem is something that comes in the way of me becoming successful. And it creates a mindset, a rigid mindset or inflexible mindset. And we don't want that. We want a person with growth mindset facing a problem that I'm a problem solver. I can take care of that. Oh, I can take care of that as well. Nudge your students, your children to think, what would Jesus do? This is interesting. You can replace that. You can even say, what will Amelia Bedelia do? You can say, what would your older brother do? You can say, what will Michael Phelps do? Why? It is literally activating a perspective of the other. It is thinking that there are multiple ways to solve this problem other than my own perspective on how I would do it. So this is a really wonderful thing. This can be even your, like my grandfather was an educator, so I would kind of tell stories to my children about my grandfather, and I would say, what would he do if he was living in these times? So now what you're having to do is think about his ability and current conditions, and you have to come up with a solution. Help students recruit 50,000 coaches. As the school year is beginning, make sure that you have conversations with your you have conversations with your children about who are the people that you look up to. I was working with a student yesterday, and I told him a simple issue came about. He just moved into, he's a freshman in college, and he was moved into a dorm room and was setting his own room. I said, how many rooms have you seen? What I meant by that, when you walk around the dorm on your floor and get to see multiple people's way of doing the way they do things, you're getting ideas. You're getting free coaching without asking. So same way, if you have siblings, go to your expert sibling and say, hey, you seem to be getting your homework done on time. What are you doing? If you have a classroom and you see one kid who's master of his domain when it comes to Zoom class, you go into him and say, where did you learn about that? Did you watch a webinar that told you about these tricks? So always having this inquisitive eye for other people's expertise is a wonderful way to gain an executive function habit. The next one is bring attention to the thermostat setting. And as I said, two important settings, patience and tolerance. It's really important that the children understand that the world is full of chaos, but they are not alone in it, and the chaos is not unique to them. And if they want response from others, you need to kind of demonstrate incredible patience. Patience is, by the way, an ultimate sign of respect, if you think about it. And tolerance is another sign of compassion. So what you're doing is your thermostat is set for compassion. And to me, if anything is true about this world, is how can we lead children to become these incredibly wonderful humans who have a great way of looking at the world, which doesn't judge the world and doesn't consider it as unsafe space or annoying space or a space that comes in the way of my achievement of my own star, superstar, or stretch goals. No, you can, all of us can achieve goals together in a combined way. And last, help the students to look back so that they can look ahead. Do not let them dismiss their mistakes. Do not think that we are you're too much concerned about me turning my assignment late. And you remind them, it's not that I'm concerned about the assignment being turned late, but I'm thinking, are you really knowing how to not turn the assignment late? So looking back is an incredible tool. So as I come to a conclusion of this webinar, Please sign up for our webinar. Please sign up for the podcast. It's called Full Prefrontal, Exposing the Mysteries of Executive Function. Sign up there. You get a newsletter. I have some amazing guests we will be releasing a webinar I keep saying webinar, sorry. A wonderful episode tomorrow, which is with a neuroscientist who talks about boredom. So stay tuned for that. And finally, thank you for being amazing individuals, great inspirational companions and peers, and thank you for your time. Go get them. It's going to be an amazing school year, and just know that it requires courage on our part to be bold. It requires us to be incredibly patient, and it requires us to master our executive function. So I hope this webinar was useful to you. Please share with your friends, and thank you for joining me today. It's been nothing but joy. Have fun. Bye.